The Washington Post reported yesterday, on March the 8th, that President Trump and members of Congress had a private cabinet meeting to explore new restrictions on the video game industry. It is the belief that such violent media contributed to the mass shootings at schools by young adults. We still don't know the outcome of the meeting, but we know some of what happened and what was said. There's one such video posted privately by the White House YouTube channel, which shows a collection of clips from other YouTubers of violent depictions of humans killing other humans with knives and guns and what have you from some popular video games. Not the worst of games, let's say, like Manhunt, but certainly very graphic. I think the first scene is the best, where an American is calling a Spetsnaz a communist, while he gets clubbed to death by said operative. Now, I don't know how the office of the president works, or the president in a general sense. As I'm Canadian, I have much bigger issues to deal with here, but I do know that this argument has been had since 1997, and there's been no studies or evidence linking violent media, let alone video games, with real-world events, especially mass shootings at schools. But there's nothing wrong with having an investigation or roundtable discussion. It also shows just how ignorant some people are of these studies and the cultural groanings the industry has gone through with people like Jack Thompson, whose opinion on video game violence has clearly changed. He's now a very reasonable guy. Luckily, a member of the ESA was there to make this obvious case. We discussed the numerous scientific studies establishing that there is no connection between video games and violence, First Amendment protection of video games, and how our industry's rating system effectively helps parents make informed entertainment choices. Now, there's always going to be ignorant people. That's fine. We don't know everything. Melissa Henson, program director of the Parents Television Council, said that there's a steady diet of media violence is having a corrosive effect on our culture, while video game executives were every bit as firm in their conviction there is no relation. Now, any kind of media obviously has an impact on our culture. We wouldn't consume it otherwise, and it wouldn't be popular or compelling to consume. But whether that's corrosive is subjective, and whether that's good or bad is also subjective. But whether it causes violence, that is not subjective. For example, you could easily make an innocent statement like gangster rap or death metal is having a corrosive effect on our culture, with rappers and musicians talking about killing and raping and all sorts of bad things. But without any studies showcasing people being directly influenced by that music and correlating said negative behavior, it's really an empty claim. In fact, it seems said music came out of the violent behavior, not the other way around. And this was similar to an argument done back in the 80s, where the First Amendment was protected by Frank Zappa over controversial lyrics in music, and not even his music, just music in general, which is the whole point of the First Amendment, that is, to say controversial things. Even in the 60s, people thought the Beatles were a threat to the nation's youth. Go back as far as Plato, who knew there was some connection between the sharing of ideas and how influential musicians, playwrights, and poets were, although his solution was to have a censorship of those artists. Marco Rubio was at the meeting. He acknowledged that there is no evidence linking violent video games to the tragedy in Parkland, but he said he wanted to ensure parents are aware of the resources available to them to monitor and control the entertainment their children are exposed to. One Democrat who wasn't at the meeting said focusing entirely on video games distracts from the substantive debate we should be having about how to take guns out of the hands of dangerous people. This is Richard Blumenthal. I would ask them respectively for once to stop playing politics. If you care about this issue, you will look to Jonesboro, Arkansas, Columbine, Newton, Connecticut, in so many other places where you had mass shootings by children. In every instance I just gave, that child who was the shooter was watching violent video games. I think it's pretty safe to say that those children were also watching violent movies, television, books, and have some sort of broken social structure and some degree of poor parenting if children had access to guns. The article goes on to say that Trump is hardly the first politician to call attention to violent video games. Senator Hillary Clinton sought to restrict sales of mature-themed video games to minors. The issue drew the attention of President Barack Obama following the mass shooting of Sandy Hook. At the time, he called on Congress to fund new federal research into the link between these games and aggression and violence in youngsters, a request that lawmakers never delivered. While more studies are always helpful, it's probably because we already have the studies that show that video games do not cause violence. Now, if members of government think gun laws will solve the issue, great. Go for it. I have no idea if that will work. But I hope that after this meeting, that they will see that violent media has no impact on violence in reality.